Hi, I'm Jera Summerford. I'm president of TEA and I'm a high school math teacher from Gatlinburg. I wanted to share with you today some updates on the teacher license policy changes that we've been following very closely here in Nashville. On Friday, August 16, 2013, the State Board of Education approved policy changes to teacher license advancement and renewal. Due to pushback from TEA and other groups, the policy will not take effect until August 1st, 2015, and the State Board will consider amendments to the policy in the coming year. This creates an opportunity for TEA to offer alternatives to the policy changes and its dependence on TVAAS scores for teachers. As shared by TEA General Counsel Rick Colbert, this presentation today highlights the problems with using TVAAS data as a basis for license advancement and renewal. I thank you for your consideration and attention.
On August 12, we distributed a presentation to members of the State Board of Education. That presentation showed why the Commissioner's proposal to base teacher licensure decisions solely on TVAAS results, regardless of what the teacher may have made on her overall evaluation scores, was misguided. Unfortunately, the State Board of Education decided to approve the Commissioner's proposal despite the serious questions it raised among education stakeholders. Since the State Board of Education has now lit the fuse to destroy teachers' careers based solely on TVAAS results, we thought it important to remind the State Board and others why that is such a bad idea while there is still time to put out that fuse. In this, our second presentation on this proposal, we will further illustrate what is wrong with the Commissioner's effort to turn TVAAS estimates into blunt tools with which to end teachers' careers. You will recall from our first presentation that we shared this email from Zach Rossley, Deputy Assistant Commissioner of Data and Research at the Tennessee Department of Education. This letter represented the department's explanation for the shifting and changing TVAAS results of a teacher from West Tennessee, Cynthia Watson. You will also recall that neither SAS nor the department regarded Ms. Watson's changing and fluctuating TVAAS results as an anomaly. We want to begin our discussion today about the misuse of TVAAS results, where Mr. Rossley began the department's explanation of Ms. Watson's results. In the department's own words, as a starting point, we always want to emphasize that teacher effect scores are estimates. Or, as teachers and principals were told years ago in a primer on TVAAS developed by its authors, TVAAS results are an estimate of the truth. The real thing exists in theory only. With that preface, let us again examine the Commissioner's justification for using this estimate of the truth to destroy a teacher's career. On June 21, 2013, the Commissioner gave a presentation to the State Board of Education at a work session in order to explain his licensure proposal. That presentation was titled Redesigning the Pathway to Teaching, Spring 2013. The slide you are looking at now was on page 9 of that presentation. We were very critical of that slide, questioning its authenticity and accuracy. If you go on the State Board of Education website now and look at the version of the Commissioner's presentation that is an exhibit to the agenda of the August 16 meeting, you will find that this slide has been taken out. But it was certainly an important part of how the Commissioner justified his proposal when he presented it to the State Board. This slide purports to have come from a report by the Center of Education Policy Research at Harvard. You can find the actual report online. It is from the Strategic Data Project, which is housed at the Harvard Center for Education Policy Research. We will talk a little more about the Strategic Data Project in another presentation. For now, let's look inside this report. On page 7 of the report, at the top of the page, we find two graphs that chart teacher effect returns to years of experience. The one on the left is for math, and the one on the right is for English and Language Arts, or ELA. When you look at them side by side, you can see that the Commissioner's chart is a version of the chart in the Strategic Data Project report dealing with ELA teacher effects. Of course, the Commissioner connected the dots and added his plateau comment and arrow. For today's discussion, those additions are irrelevant, except to note that they are not found in the document he cites as his source. What is important is what is left out in the Commissioner's version of this chart, the shaded area and the explanation of that area in the actual chart that is in the Strategic Data Project report. That shaded area represents a 90% confidence interval. To the average layperson, and perhaps even to the average State Board of Education member, the significance of the confidence interval may not be crystal clear. But to properly interpret statistical estimates, which is what TVAAS results are, the confidence interval is critical. They take confidence intervals into account in Chicago, for example, where Secretary Duncan was the CEO of the public school system and pushed his reform agenda for years with no discernible results. In this slide from a PowerPoint presentation on the Chicago Public Schools value-added model, confidence intervals are explained as accounting for both random error and for factors that cannot be measured but affect test scores, such as motivation to learn, family circumstances, and health. In Chicago, they explain that the confidence interval is a range of scores around the value-added estimate. Using a 95% confidence interval means that we are 95% confident that the true value-added score falls within the confidence interval range. In fairness, we have been reminded in the past of confidence intervals in TVAAS estimates. In 2007, our own Tennessee Department of Education explained that TVAAS estimates include a standard error, which is a measure of the uncertainty around the score. And in a primer for teachers and principals on TVAAS, the authors of the system explained years ago that if you add and subtract the standard error from the estimate it is associated with, you get a confidence band, the confidence interval. That confidence interval is the wiggle room that accounts for possible error in the estimate. In fact, if you want a 95% confidence interval, which is generally what is used for predictive value, you actually add and subtract almost 2 times the standard error to the estimate. To illustrate these confidence intervals in real TVAAS results, let us look again at Cynthia Watson, the 7th grade science teacher we discussed in our earlier presentation. What you see on this slide are Ms. Watson's TVAAS estimates for 2010, 2011, and 2012, all as reported on her 2012 TVAAS report. Next to each estimate, in parentheses, is the standard error reported for each estimate. Even if we just subtract only 1 time the standard error for each estimate and only add 1 time the standard error for each estimate, we get these wide ranges, and that only gives us a 65% confidence interval. You can see here that there is wild variation from year to year in Ms. Watson's TVAAS results, not at all consistent with the Commissioner's assertion that TVAAS is a strong predictor of future performance for veteran teachers. What you can also see is just how important it is to account not only for the estimate itself, but also for the confidence interval, particularly when you are talking about something that is as unstable and volatile as TVAAS estimates. So why, in his presentation to promote using TVAAS estimates for licensure decisions, did the Commissioner take the confidence interval out of this graph? Could it be that this confidence interval, which actually grows wider as a teacher gains experience, just does not jive with his assertion of how strong a predictor TVAAS is of future performance and how stable teacher impact on student growth remains. Years ago, the authors of TVAAS cautioned that if standard errors of estimates are not taken into account, it would be very easy to overreact to differences among reported gains and percentages. When standard errors and confidence intervals are properly understood, the fundamental unfairness of relying on those volatile and imprecise TVAAS estimates to end teachers' careers is obvious. Hopefully, the State Board of Education will take standard errors and confidence intervals into account as it reconsiders this unwise plan to misuse TVAAS estimates as though they had some element of mathematical certainty to them.